Hi there, I'm Sue Stockdale and welcome to the Sports 2000 podcast. This series takes you behind the scenes of this British sports car prototype series that includes Duratecs and Pintos, where we talk to some of the people involved in the Sports 2000 community and give you an insight into why Sports 2000 is sometimes called motorsport's best kept secret. Well, my guest today is Peter Brouwer, a Dutchman who regularly brings his Duratec over from Holland to compete. And as you will hear in this episode, Peter has got a fascinating background and is quite an adrenaline junkie. One of the moments that certainly got his heart racing that was unplanned was when he was in a private jet in 1985 with former circuit director of Zandvoort on his way to Bernie Ecclestone's office when it crashed into a field without the landing gear out. Well, that's just the start of it, and as you will discover in this conversation, Peter's love for risk-taking extends beyond just racing cars and includes bobsleigh and luge. I think you'll find this episode fascinating. Welcome to the Sports 2000 podcast, Peter. And you're a Dutchman and travelling across to join in the Sports 2000 championships in the UK?
Yeah, every time, yeah.
Wow, that's quite a commitment. How easy or difficult is it to travel across these days?
Oh, you mean after COVID or after Brexit? Well, basically
well, both.
Yeah. It is, at the moment, it is quite easy. You just have to find the key that unlocks certain bureaucracy. But if you know what, then there's no problem.
And do you bring your race car over every time, or is it?
Yeah.
So you're travelling with all your equipment as well?
Yes, every time. And just for people to know, I went through the hoops and got my ATA carnet, but I presented it once because once they asked, can you prove this is your racing car? And I said, well, I can prove it, but nobody wants to know. Nobody wants to see it. And basically they say, put it away. We don't want to know. You know, you're going over for an event. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
That sounds like it's not too onerous.
No, on the British side, it's where are you off to? Oh, to a circuit. Oh, all right. Okay. And I have to admit, it's only Harwich that I do at the moment because it's convenient at the moment to do Hook of Holland Harwich. If the French are quite the same, I think it is because it's an exception rule that they're using. So why not?
At least you're able to get in fairly easily into the UK. And why come to the UK? Is there no Sports 2000 elsewhere in Europe?
It's the heartland of motorsport. I can safely say that. It's the passion of motorsport into a general Brit is much more than it is here, than it is in Holland or whatever. I mean, of course, we've got max fever at the moment, but it even amounts to even the hooligans start to like motorsport. So that's not all positive.
I imagine that you've been around cars and motorsport for many years, Peter. Is that correct?
Yes, basically all my life.
Where did that start?
As a little boy, always was interested in motor racing. And then, of course, you start to frequent events, which is a bit difficult because nobody in my vicinity, not in my family, not in friends, was interested in motor racing. So I had to find ways as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old to get to the circuits. And, well, live in Amsterdam, it's not too far from Zandvoort. You can try. And then slightly older, you want to know more. So you go to the driving school, the racing school, because they can use a little bit of help or they can use this, that, and the other. And you can see how do I get my nails into this sport, And that's what I did. And one of my love for sports cars is actually from the sports car series of the 70s, 1969, 70, 71. That's when I joined the Canon racing team at the time with John Burton and Ward. And first I did the publicity there. I did the photographs and I had to make sure, as a 16-year-old, to write the articles about the beautiful progress of the Canon cars and deliver the photographs. And the photographs had to be in Holland at the desk of 2 magazines at Tuesday morning. So it was getting a bit hectic, and that was the way I started to get used to racing. And John Burton actually quite encouraged me because I kept saying, how do I start to do it myself? I want to do this myself. And he said, get miles, however you acquire them, in a go-kart or in a car or in whatever. Miles, miles, miles. That's what I started doing. So the moment I could get my driving license, I could move around on my own. And I acquired a go-kart and started to run on all the circuits I could. And being of my nature, it didn't stop with just a national championship. Whenever there was no race, I started looking for races in Germany, in Italy, in Austria. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't do it, whatever, but I did. And how? Well, by the generosity of many of the people that were there, because most of the time I didn't even have money to pay for the fuel to go back. But they helped, and I did. And, I think they quite liked somebody as fanatical as I was at the time.
And were you winning races? Were you able to progress?
Yes, I was winning. I had a lot of bad luck as well. In my best year, I had engines that blew rather more frequently. But on the whole, a go-kart race is usually 3 races a day. And usually I manage to win 2. And sometimes even finish the 3rd one as well. And then you have the overall win. But I was quite successful and then started doing it European Championship, 125cc and so on. Became a works driver, but as a works driver, then you still have to pay everything yourself, and nobody was supporting me. I had to do that myself. But, it's motor racing.
When there's passion involved and determination, people find a way of making things happen, don't they?
Exactly.
So with this progress that you were making, this success that you were having, did that give you bigger aspirations to go into other categories?
Yes, and it also made me completely and utterly broke. I had to find ways of financing my card, financing the races and so on. And at the end of the year, there was all of a sudden another championship, a European championship. You have to do that, you have to do this, that, and the other. And I actually had to go round the houses, round friends and whatever, to borrow all the money I could actually borrow to finance that bit. And then after that, I said, well, I'll better finish my studies first and then get back to motor racing.
And is that what you did in the end?
It's more or less what I did, but I then went to university. And at university, of course, the speed in the blood wasn't enough. So I heard about bobsleigh and that it was paid for. And you had luge, and they paid for your accommodation, and they paid for your traveling. So I thought, that's a good sport. Goes fast, has nearly 4 wheels. A bobsleigh has 4. So I started to do that. And I am quite a fanatical character. So with bobsleighing, the rest was hindering me, i.e., you could never do it because you needed so and so, you needed so and so, either one man as a brakeman, but you need also someone for the equipment, or you need 3 other people. And also, everyone has reasons why not. And I'm very much, let's do it, and then we'll see. So I switched to luge. I thought, I can do more runs a day. I can do it on my own. I can do it basically whenever it is. And that's when I only did bobsleigh for relaxation, bobsleighing on the road, which is extremely funny. It's really nice to do. And the luging I took up to a reasonable level. I qualified for the Winter Olympics in 1980 and then was asked to not do it. This was a last-minute thing, but the Dutch Federation was overcrowded because they had an ice hockey team for the first time and all that. So I had myself financially taken out of the picture.
That must have been frustrating.
Well, they promised me I could do 84. I could do Sarajevo. And in the meantime, they paid for things, and so they made my life a bit easier. Unfortunately, I never made Sarajevo.
Just to give the listener a sense of what in a luge, it's almost like a tea tray, isn't it, that you're going down on your back? Am I right, or on your front?
No, this is the one where you lay on your back. Basically, it is the fastest sport on the ice channel, and it is also the hardest. Most of the world champions, when they're getting too old, they go and do bobsleighing because they're so well equipped. It's much easier to do.
And did you get the same adrenaline rush, the same sense of satisfaction going down an ice run in a luge compared to being in a car?
No, it had to make do. First and foremost, I think I'm a little bit more skillful in a car than I'm on that luge. When I started to get results, I was helped by the German team and the East Germans even. But when I started to interfere amongst their team, they started to play really dirty games and giving you false information. I had accidents like no tomorrow, because that's the effect. If somebody tells you, you're slightly too high in 9, you start to correct it. Yeah, but if that's not the problem, your problem starts to get further on, much bigger. That's what happened, and that wasn't very pleasant.
No, I can imagine that doesn't sound very sporting. And I'm imagining you don't get that sense of competitiveness or even envy or jealousy, perhaps, that might have existed there when you're in Sports 2000.
Sports 2 is wonderful. I first started in Sports 2 in 84, and then it was very competitive. The European Championship was the EFTA Championship. Wasn't so hotly contested by the Brits, but on the continent we had fields of 60, 70 cars from Scandinavia and all over Europe. And the manufacturers fielded works cars, that sort of thing. It was a serious operation. And we then started to come to England at the Formula Ford Festival. So my first Formula Ford Festival was 1985. And we all had international licenses, but the Brits did not make it easy for us to come over. We had to hand in our licenses and had to apply for a national British license. Because they were too afraid we would interfere in the championship. Yeah, rightly or wrongly, I don't know. But we loved the Formula Ford Festival, the world championship of. That was great. So with pleasure, we did it for, I think, 3 or 4 years or so in a row.
So I'm just getting the timeline straight in my head that you finished luge and then moved on to motorsport afterwards. Is that correct?
Well, I finished luge because I fell ill. And that was a very serious, life-threatening illness, which took quite some time to overcome. And then when it sort of went reasonable, I started motor racing again.
So it sounds like that you're very driven by what's possible and passion for speed, regardless of whether it's on ice or in a car. How are you faring then? You're driving Duratecs now, is that correct? How do you like the Duratec?
I really love the extra power. It's a bit more responsive than a Pinto. But a Pinto is a whole different way of driving. You're driving more on torque, and the other one is more on power. And the approach of the car is different.
And for those that may be watching you race, what colour is your car and what number is it?
My car is at the moment mainly green, and I should have had a new body fitted. But apparently it's a bit difficult to get the molds and to do all that. It's mainly green with stickers, and it has a bit of orange. And maybe by the next race I have the tail sprayed. It's getting better, and it still stays green.
And what number is it?
Number 6.
Number 6 that we can look out for. As you've been enjoying the races in the Sports 2000 Championship this season, which have been, of course, in the UK, are you also doing Sports 2000 races in Europe as well?
Well, yeah, I did it during COVID. I joined the French a little bit. But as I said before, the spirit in the UK is second to none. The French have a different way of enjoying their motorsport weekend, which does not quite, I'll suffer it if I have to, but, it's more, the British weekend is more for me.
What do you kind of get from it these days? Is it still about getting, the sense of adrenaline? Is it the competitiveness? Why do you do it, I suppose?
Because you can, which means I'm very pleased that I'm now 70, that I can still do it. I've had a bit of history, and so then I think, I was 27 and they told me you have 3 months to live. I'm now 70 and I'm racing. Who are you kidding? What's going on?
What a wonderful example you are for others who perhaps think, why not? You're kind of proving that you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What are your aspirations for this season, Peter? Obviously, the championship hasn't finished yet.
Well, unfortunately, I have to admit that Helmut Marko of the youth program of Red Bull has actually now said, well, no, we do not have an opening for it. But that, of course, was my aspiration. No, enjoy myself and enjoy the company of the very generous people in the Sports 2000 field. It's amazing. You have a problem and people come and help you.
You haven't been to that Chris Snowden's big lorry, have you? And got all the bits out of his lorry that were discussed in an earlier podcast episode?
Well, that's exactly it. People rally round to get you going. And it is the atmosphere, it is the friendliness when you're not racing. And on the track, you can be a hard racer, yes, but with a sporty mind, please. And that's what I find in the UK.
Well, it's certainly one thing that's been a common theme amongst a lot of our podcast guests is talking about the friendliness and the camaraderie off the track within the Sports 2000 community. So I'm glad you get that sense as well from what you're saying.
No, to me, it has always been that you can be ultra competitive, but it doesn't give any sense of satisfaction if you're the only racer and you finish first because you're the only one. What does it bring? There is no satisfaction in that. Of course, you help people, and also because they're nice and they would do the same for you.
And finally, if there were other races, other circuits that you would love to be able to drive at, is there anything that you have as an aspiration or circuit to drive at or a race to participate in?
Yeah, Bathurst in Australia. I do think my time has, I've passed that sort of, it's only for professionals these days. You get shoved out of the way when you have but that's the mentality. But Bathurst would certainly appeal to me. I find that fantastic.
Well, I hope you know our other podcast guest, Rob Whitwell. So I hope you had a chance to have a conversation with him since he is Australian. Maybe you'll get across there one day to race in Bathurst.
Could be. Hopefully.
Well, it's been lovely to speak to you today and get a sense of why you're in motorsport, what your own story is, and how much you seem to be enjoying participating in the Sports 2000 community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank basically the Sports 2000 field for having me and for, suffering my continental habits.
I would probably say it's enriching, Peter, if nothing else. It's enriching.
I hope. Very politely said. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Peter Brouwer. And he did tell me that Mike Turner is his inspiration. So he is certainly planning to be driving for a few years yet. I'm sure you'll also have plenty to talk to him about the next time you see him at a race circuit. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or tell your friends about it too. Remember, you can connect with us on social media. And of course, we'll look forward to connecting with you soon for the next episode of the Sports 2000 podcast.